two, one.
Well, if this is a class on the philosophy of human nature, I thought that before we got started and actually looking at particular views, theories of human nature, we actually ask ourselves in a completely sort of, I don't know, as an absolute beginning without any preconceptions, like what do we actually mean by human nature? That is, we have to have a sense of what these philosophers are trying to do or what question they're trying to answer, or what they're responding to before we can really have a sophisticated sense of what they're saying. Just what is it that they're trying to define, or what kind of claims are they trying to make? So it is worthwhile just to look at this expression, human nature, and just to dwell on it, just to ask questions about it and think about it. What do we mean by human nature? Well, before we talk about the expression as a whole, let's look at its parts. Two parts, human and nature. The word nature is a very complicated word. It's used in so many different senses. It has such a extensive etymology. I mean, just an extensive history of the use of that word and its relation to the Latin and also the Greek, indirectly, the Greek forebears of that word. Nature is a very complicated word. Human would seem, on the face of it, to be a much simpler word, to be more concrete and to have more definite limits. Human nature. But what do we mean by human? I mean, when we say human, do we mean that in a purely biological sense? Like, what I mean is, isn't the biological sense of being human, isn't that more or less extensive with my computer's slow. In the biological sense, well, being human just means being a member of a particular species. That is, that human is just equivalent to, I don't know, bird or dog or fish. It's more specific, obviously, since there are different species of birds and dogs and fish, and there's only one human species left. There used to be more on the earth, obviously. Neanderthals and Homo erectus and all our sort of previous forms of hominids. But there is a biological sense, and human just means I'm a member of a particular species, Homo sapiens, that I'm classified, that being a human just means being an individual. It's been classified biologically in that way. And that's all it would mean. And some philosophers would say that's all it could mean, and it's all it does mean. Any other meaning would be, unfounded. But there's a more philosophical sense, there's at least traditional, of human, which is much harder to define and much harder to set limits to, maybe just because it's philosophical. There is a certain sense in which the human beings, once they began to actually reflect on themselves, certainly saw themselves as distinct from the rest of the rest of nature, to use that word before we look at it, or before we start to analyze it, that human beings, that being a human being, human in the sense of being a human being, carries along with it a lot of philosophical freight. What does it mean to be a human being? Is that the same as the biological sense? Is there something different? Are there traits to being a human being which cannot be reduced to simple biological traits. We would say having certain genes, having certain DNA. The philosophical sense of human being, again, is hard to define, but it's oftentimes summed up in the notion of person. But human beings are different, again, from the rest of nature insofar as human beings are persons. And this begins a whole different discussion of what constitutes a person. So when we ask about human nature, it's not clear from the beginning, what sense, or maybe we're asking both senses, I don't know. The biological sense, being a member of the species Homo sapiens is simply a matter of what genetic material you carry, or what your lineage is. Did you come from humans biologically? You're human. That's really more or less a biological sense. The philosophical sense of human being is much more open-ended. So it's not really clear from the beginning what even human means here, but certainly these things are in play. How about the word nature? Well, there's nature, and we use that word in all sorts of ways. Nature, colloquially, means what's outside, trees and grass, and the less there is of human structures and human technology, the more natural we say something is. Get out in nature, preserve nature. There is another sense of that word, broader sense, where nature is just the whole natural world, or the nature is just the whole physical world, as opposed to any non-physical aspects of the world. In the sense that, let's say, physics studies nature. We have something called natural science, which is physics, chemistry, biology, studies of, how the fundamental material world is actually structured and behaves. So nature could be, really is, in a certain sense, everything. But that we all have, as opposed to the natural sciences, we have this notion of the human sciences, psychology, maybe, sociology, certainly sociology, and the humanities, which study things that have to do with human beings and human life, but we don't call them, parts of nature, part of human culture. Nature as opposed to culture, the artificial as opposed to the natural, those sort of things. So there's different senses of the word nature. Does it mean just like nature in the colloquial sense of what's outside, sunshine, the ocean, lakes, trees, animals, as opposed to the artificial things that human beings build up through civilization, culture, and technology? Is nature the widest sense of just what exists in the universe? There's another sense of the word nature, which is probably the one that is most germane to what we're doing. Something, in the sense of something having nature. And that's obviously related, but distinct sense. Having a nature, something that is, let's say, a congenital or structural feature of a thing is its nature. What is the nature of this and that? What is its essence? The nature of, I don't know, let's say the nature of music, or it doesn't have to be a living thing. The nature of history, the nature of American government, the nature of classical music, something like that. We're asking when we ask about something's nature, we're asking about what is most essential to it, what is built into it and operates in a certain way in it. So it's that sense of nature, I think, that we have to begin to focus on. So I'll make one more video, perhaps just focusing on that sense of nature, that sense of the word nature in the sense of something having a nature.